Everyone is like, I want to go home now. So bear with me. So my project, I think, is quite different to what has been presented in the conference so far, and is about my teaching practice. So I am a teaching associate at the University of Nottingham, and this is a project I've been leading within the School of Psychology, along with my colleague Stephanie MacDonald.
I don't want to do that.
Okay, so essentially, as you probably already know, Decolonize the Curriculum is about revisiting those power structures and working towards creating a more inclusive environment. And it's also about re-examining not only what we teach, but also how we teach it. So all of this sounds quite good from a theoretical point of view. However, when it comes to actually applying those changes in our own teaching practice, we encounter a few challenges. So these are just only a few of the challenges that academics might encounter during that process of trying to diversify and decolonize their own curriculum, but I'm just going to focus on these three that I have found that are relevant to this current project. So first of all is the historical context. So at least within psychology, core theories and paradigms are generated and developed in the West. So all the core theories that we have to teach are white, male, and Western. So this kind of creates a limitation itself in terms of the content we can teach. In addition, when thinking about maybe cross-cultural races, to make us think about those theories in a more kind of critical way, we encounter some political and economic barriers as well in terms of how much research is out there, but also the reality that this cross-cultural research comes with a lot of biases, especially those that are the kind of research that is generated by Western academics and researchers trying to apply some very Western concepts in very different cultures. And finally, some institutional barriers and the reality that within higher education in the UK, the majority of staff are white and European. So considering these challenges, I was thinking, what is the approach I can take to change my own teaching and kind of move towards decolonizing the curriculum? And I decided to adopt an evidence-based approach that will also invite students to become co-creators of knowledge and take part in that process of creating a more inclusive and diverse curriculum. So we started with kind of a single module, and we recruited a diverse group of students to review that module. And then based on our findings, the idea is to create an approach that then it will be an evidence-based approach, a systematic approach that can be applied in different modules in psychology, not only in psychology, but in any sort of discipline within higher education. And this is a project I'm going to present today, sort of our first step towards achieving that goal. Okay, so as I said, this is a student-led project, it's a student-staff partnership. Students chose to focus on the first year developmental psychology module, and this happened to be the module I'm leading. I know what you're thinking there, but this is ultimately, it was their decision to choose that module, it wasn't mine. But I'm happy they did, because that meant I could actually make a lot of changes myself. So they examined the taught materials in our lectures, and then they reported the results and worked towards specific suggestions for each lecture. So now I'm going to present some of the findings that we had. So as you can see, these are the majority of the theories that are presented in throughout the lectures. This is kind of the overview of the module. Is that a laser? Okay, yes, there we go. Okay, so it's just predominantly white and male. But this pattern also existed in pictorial representations within the lecture slides, for example, pictures or videos that demonstrate specific tasks related to the content of the module. So as you can see, this is extremely biased. But also, looking at the first lecture, that is the theories of development, this is a core lecture because the whole module is based that are first introduced. We can see that is literally European and from the United States, all the theories of development, and then the research that is also presented to support these theories is also mainly from the States and European. So extremely narrow and extremely biased. And this is the rule, is not an exception in universities. So at the next stage, the students provided some suggestions what we can do to diversify our module, and this included both kind of literature review, some research studies or cross-cultural research, but also some seminar and lecture activities that we could include in our modules to kind of diversify it. Okay, so taking the suggestions from the students, I decided to take an active learning approach to make those changes. So the idea here was that the lecture content had to remain pretty much the same, but what I did was I included loads of interactive activities to go along with the lecture materials that will kind of help students identify biases in theory and research, kind of think critically about what they're taught, and examine whether cross-cultural research, for example, supports key theories of development, what does that tell us about key theories and their universality, and also reflect on the mechanisms involved in the generation of knowledge. So I'm not going to go into that in much detail, but these are three different examples from very different lectures. But for example, in the last one, on the lecture about intelligence and the nature versus nurture debate, I got them to think about ethnic, cultural, and socioeconomic factors that might affect, for example, influence our perception of intelligence or even performance in intelligence tests and so on. So I forgot to mention, most of these activities were done using Padlet, and this is an audience response tool where students can post things on a space and they can interact with each other. So these are just some examples from different lectures. As you can see, a lot of students got involved and participated in these activities, and they provided a lot of research, so they went away, did some research based on the topic that I had given them. This included mainly cross-cultural studies, and then that created a basis for interactive discussions about these topics. So in this case, we see an example of how students become the generators of knowledge and the generators of content, but also using that as an example to help us think critically about what we're taught and how we're taught. This is another example I'm not going to have time to go through, but it's a gender example. But anyway, so in addition to that, we developed a novel measure to examine the impact of those changes we're making. So kind of making all the changes throughout the module, and then we want to evaluate what students thought about. Did they actually make a difference? And this impact evaluation measure is across 3 dimensions of diversity, inclusion, and identity. And as I said, the idea is to measure the impact those changes have, but also get feedback and further suggestions from students about further things we can do to improve this module. So finally, based on this, we have created a module that, as I said at the beginning, can be applied not only to psychology modules, but any modules throughout the university. So this starts with recruiting a body of students to review a specific module, and these students will work very closely with members of academic staff. At the next stage, these students will review the module and suggest some changes, and at the same time, the students that are taking part in that module, so the student cohort, will also take part in the impact evaluation survey. So then you have 2 different types of feedback, and again, you use students in 2 separate ways to create content for your own module. So this, at the end, the staff obviously reviews the suggestions of the students, both from the impact evaluation survey, but also the projects. And finally, they apply those changes in their module and then go back to the beginning, re-evaluating that the next academic year. So to finish off, the key features of our approach is basically introducing interactive activities to evaluate and reflect on the content taught in our modules. Is providing students the opportunity to become knowledge generators and content creators through the student-led activities. And finally is an evidence-based approach. We collect data throughout this process. It's systematic and it involves key stakeholders in any decision-making process. So finally, I just want to say, if you found that interesting, or if you want to find out more, or if you're interested in any collaborations, please do get in touch with me. Thank you.